welcome to this ChannelX Leaders interview. And I'm delighted to be joined by David, Chief Commercial Officer at Evri. So welcome, David. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Good. Now, before we speak about Evri, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you've come from and how you ended up at Evri?
Absolutely. So I'm a little new to this industry. I joined Evri about 3.5 years ago, first covering our out-of-home SME, C2C, and fulfillment businesses. And then over the last couple of years have grown that remit to cover our international business and our corporate business as well. I find it fascinating because it's a both highly people-driven business and a highly data-driven business. And that's a rare combination. So it keeps it really interesting, really fresh. Before all of that, I actually did a couple of startups. So I was the chief operating officer of a company called Stewart Delivery, which was
that was last mile delivery.
That's it, exactly. So not exactly the same model, but clearly logistics adjacent and some similar principles. That was a fantastic experience. We built that from the ground up, from zero to about 500 million revenue, and sold that business to GeoPost, which is the parent company of DPD. And before that, I did a startup in the restaurant technology space. It was called Uncover, and we did mobile payments and bookings for sort of mid to high-end restaurants. That was my first company ever. So it always hold a dear place in my heart, and we sold that business back in 2015.
That's quite interesting because restaurants carriers don't really sound like they're aligned, but actually, if you look at it from the data side and restaurants are full of people, it is a very similar proposition.
So that's exactly it. Superficially, there is just no link. But when you think about the business models that sit underneath them, the major problem restaurants were trying to solve was how to optimize the last sort of 10 to 20% of their revenue, fill up those seats and make sure the restaurants are fully booked every evening. Because that's where all the profit comes from. So the margins are very thin in that world, and getting to 80% utilization really just covers your costs. So making absolutely sure that you have full paying diners coming in to go to fully booked is the whole game. And that's a very data driven exercise. So a lot of sort of techniques or principles that we apply to managing a big logistics organization are very much in keeping with those.
And tell me about Evri's growth, because that must be the same. I know you've got massive fulfillment centres and you've got local carriers all over the country, and they need to all earn a living. And I'm guessing it must be the same, that a warehouse that's only operating sort of 8 hours a day, isn't it? It needs filling up and operating 24 hours a day. So how's Evri's growth been over the past few years, and especially post-pandemic? It's interesting.
Yeah, it's been absolutely fascinating. So I joined in 2021. For about a year before I joined, the company just skyrocketed. Went from about 350 million parcel a year business to 650. I wasn't there, so I can't take credit for it, but the operational challenge of absorbing that much extra business so quickly was enormous. And I think we were either lucky or good, as the saying goes, to have really committed to investments in the network and the infrastructure. That was always our USP, the ability to very quickly and efficiently scale and create value out of density. That was exactly what was needed when the pandemic hit and e-commerce went up by 35 or 40%. So we were particularly well suited to absorb it. And of course, all credit to the teams who actually do that. It's much harder to do than it sounds. And then we were able to retain the growth. And that was the other sort of big difference. I think a lot of people grew during the pandemic, maybe struggled with that, and therefore shrunk again as people came back to regular ways of shopping on the high street. But we were able to hold on to the growth because we could actually sustain it. And that sort of got us through the 21-22 period. And since then, it's just been good, steady, solid year-on-year growth. We are continuing to invest. So when we think now about being able to get to that level, we'll look at expanding our current facilities. So we'll add a third tier to our Barnsley Super Hub. And then, of course, we'll open a fourth hub in a couple of years to further support that growth. And then all of that investment in the hub aspect of our network has to be matched by continuing to expand our depots, our distribution units, and our courier base.
I want to come back to that in a little while, your local distribution. But first of all, can we talk about Evri's international offering? Because I think this is relatively an unknown part of the business for many retailers, but an important part. And what are the benefits for international retailers from partnering with Evri?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is pretty new for us. You can kind of split international into inbound into the UK on one hand and outbound from the UK on the other. On the first of those, we actually launched that business about 5 years ago and are now the market leader. So we do about 250 million parcels inbound into the UK every year. And to support that, we of course have the advantage of once the parcels are here, they just go through this really well-structured network we have. But we've had to invest in things like airport collection and customs clearance, and that has really enabled that offering to take off. On the outbound side, that is the much newer business where retailers aren't as familiar with us. So we launched that business about 2 years ago. It's growing really nicely, especially this year, starting to take off. And the value proposition there is, there are several angles to it. So first is it's just incredibly simple to integrate. So we try to remove all of the IT complexity, any complexities that come as a result of Brexit. So one quick integration that takes a few days of developer time to do gets you access to 220 countries around the world, all with sort of best-in-class tracking and consistency across that global carrier network. But then there are endless things I could talk about, but I'll maybe pick one that's particularly relevant at the moment. So we're always asking ourselves, how can we make that experience better, not just for the end recipient of the parcel, but for the merchant, the retailers that we work with and support. One big challenge post-Brexit has been the relationship between using postal networks and commercial networks. Without getting into the technical details, postal networks tend to be a bit slower. They won't have as much tracking. And we have built some tools to allow customers, retailers to convert their postal network parcels into commercial network parcels. And that makes it a much better experience for both the shipper and the recipient. I say all that, or I would have said all of that as something that I'm proud of as a new innovation that we brought to the market and has been growing over the past 6 months. But in light of everything that's been happening in the United States with de minimis requirements being reduced significantly and tariffs being imposed, that product is now particularly well suited to actually help retailers who will not be able to ship goods made in China into the US to do so, because we can take parcels that would have gone to USPS, convert them into commercial parcels, and have an even better delivery experience. So innovation like that, again, are you lucky or are you good? Probably a bit of both. It's something we felt would be a really important development for the market. We just didn't realize how timely it would be.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about it being timely with America removing their de minimis requirements, but we all know it's going to come to the EU as well in a couple of years. And then, in fact, I think just about every country around the world are going to look at it. And I think, personally, I think it's because the world has changed from a model where a retailer imported in bulk, paid duty and tax when goods came in bulk, and then distributed them locally, to goods are just flying across, as you say, a lot from China, and they're just not getting taxed or duty at all as small individual parcels. Governments around the world must be losing a ton of money. So I think complexities like that are only going to grow for the retailers.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it won't just be a China issue. This will be a changing landscape that forever demands more innovation. So other things we're looking at in the bigger destination markets, the US, Australia, I mean, physically, geographically bigger markets, much smarter use of data to drive regional airport leverage. So there's all sorts of ways to get parcels to the end customer faster and smarter by thinking about exactly how those flows should go. So again, it's that kind of constant innovation and iteration that's going to be required to deal with this increasingly complex global landscape.
Now, something that a question I always like to ask is, how can Evri support really fast-growing businesses? And I'm thinking that the typical journey for some people has been they'll start off using eBay labels or parcel to go, and they'll be shipping 5 or 10 parcels a day, and before they know it, they're doing 20 or 50 parcels a day, and then 100 a day, and then 500 a day, and then 1,000 a day. how can Evri support those businesses with a much more robust operation, and basically not just make their lives easier, but make them more efficient and cost effective as well?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's almost exactly how I like to think of that journey. So, we may work with a big retailer who's already very big by the time we start supporting them, but we will, of course, have many what we call micro shippers, who are people starting businesses out of their homes, out of their garage. As you say, they might do 10 parcels a day to start, then 20, 50, and so on and so on. And one day will be the next million sale retailer in the UK. So we think of that in a couple of different ways. First is that very initial experience. We've invested really substantially to build the largest out-of-home network in the UK. By that I mean a network of ParcelShops and Lockers. So we have 17,000 locations, including 4,000 post offices, that make it really easy for small businesses to inject parcels into our network and then get to the ability to take advantage of that huge cost efficiency that we bring. Another piece of the puzzle as companies start to grow is our fulfillment offering. So in our fulfillment offering, not only do we take the warehouse and distribution center costs out of the need for a smaller business that may not be able to do it at scale, we bring really two exciting bits of value. First is when you combine, what I've just described is your typical fulfillment business, and anybody can kind of do that. But when you do it as a carrier, you can combine removal of all the warehouse costs with fast injection directly into the delivery network. And so that enables later cutoffs, the ability to continue to sell, more revenue for those businesses that are starting to grow out of maybe just using our out-of-home network, but really need support to grow their business and be competitive in the marketplace. The other big area that we think we make really available to those types of SMEs is the ability to sell internationally. So we have two ways of doing that. One is when you integrate into our fulfillment network, you get immediate access to over 50 marketplaces globally. So this could be Shopify, Zalando, Amazon, eBay. You can start selling in the local stores of those locations right away through the integration that we have. It all speaks to the warehouse management system, and of course it speaks to our global outbound international delivery network. So those types of enablers, taking a small business, maybe founded in Yorkshire, right close to where our corporate headquarters are, and enables them to sell around the world in a way that they just wouldn't be able to otherwise.
Now, all these parcels flying around, the question a lot of people are asking is about how do you grow sustainably and in a way that's good for the planet? And inevitably, you've got diesel trucks running up and down the country. What's going to be happening there in the future for Evri?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. The short answer is you have to do a lot of things. There is no one single silver bullet that will allow us to reach our sustainability goals. So we're on the road to be net zero by 2035. And to get there, again, there's probably 4 or 5 big pillars. So we are significantly expanding our electric vehicle and bio CNG fleets. So if you think about our big vehicles and our vans, making more and more of those environmentally friendly is a key piece of the pillar. The out-of-home network that I already described, when you think about the out-of-home network, not just for somebody dropping off a parcel to be shipped, but also a way for people to receive parcels. It's way more environmentally friendly to deliver 50 parcels to one shop, and then everyone walks there from their home or their apartment very close by to pick up their parcel, than it is to have a courier doing 50 individual deliveries. So really quickly, as you start to shift volume into the out-of-home network from an outbound delivery perspective, you are significantly reducing carbon footprint. E-cargo bikes are another big pillar of the strategy for us. So I think this year we've done 1.5 million parcels delivered by e-cargo bike. And we've announced a further 19 million of investment on that front to grow our overall fleet to 3,000 vehicles, 3,000 bikes. So that's another big piece of the puzzle.
Now, you've just been talking about people delivering on e-bikes and local carriers, etc. I'm curious on how Evri support their people And I have to jump in here myself and say, way back, like over a decade ago, I used to have a carrier from Evri called Annie. And Annie now, with her husband, runs the local delivery depot. She's actually built a business on the back of Evri and has got employees that now deliver my parcels. I haven't seen Annie for years, but I know she's still there. So I really appreciate the opportunity that Evri can offer their people if they want to get on and grow. But what other ways are you supporting people in the business?
Well, it is the core of what we do, right? So the better our people are, the better the service will be, and the happier both the retailers and the customers will be. So that is the foundation of it all. We think about this from multiple angles as well. So that journey you just described always brings a smile to my face, because that is the perfect example of what we're trying to do. So whether it's on the operational side in the way you just discussed, or hiring grads out of uni in areas like engineering, data science, finance, etc., again, having them grow their careers and flourish within the business. Though that is exactly what we try and do. So we support that through, of course, training, pay, working conditions, making sure that career progression is always something that our current management is thinking of for the people that report into them. So, another example at the other end of the spectrum from what you described is our current commercial director who manages all of our big retailer clients here in the UK. He began life in a depot. He was just somebody working in a depot, then became manager of that depot, then took on some area responsibility, then realized he was actually really good with people and switched over to the commercial team, grew as an account manager, and then now sits on our executive committee. So that type of just sort of long-term thinking about how we really support people's progression is one of our greatest assets.
I have to say, I absolutely love that about a company where it's not just a job, but there is a career path and a progression path, and people can better themselves. It's what all businesses should strive for.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Before I let you go, I've got one more question, which is, how did Evri perform over the peak period in 2024 into New Year 2025?
It was absolutely fantastic, I have to say. We were a little nervous because the volume forecast was getting bigger and bigger, but we start our peak preparations in April. So we begin really, really early, not just sort of planning preparations, but also hiring. So we start to scale our courier fleet, for example, from 6 or 7 months before peak happens in order to be ready. Over the actual peak period, we put an extra 40 million of investment in to ensure that service levels stay where they need to be. And the result of all of that preparation, all of that work, and all of that investment this year, I think we delivered something like 173 million parcels over 9 weeks. So from that kind of early November to late December timeframe, and that was 12% up on the previous year, so far exceeding our expectations. We had the single biggest day ever in our 50-year history as a business. We did 3.8 million parcels on the 4th of December in one day alone. And we were able to do all of this despite some pretty challenging weather conditions. So I was really pleased to see how we were able to incorporate all of the excess hiring that we did, make sure people were trained up, ready to do the job, willing to fight through some pretty difficult conditions and deliver that kind of service and that kind of result.
Well, I think that describing delivering in the difficult conditions of winter just sums up how much of a people business Evri is, allied with the tech. And of course, at the end of the day, it's people that you serve, whether it be the end consumer or the businesses that use Evri.
That's right.
And I think let's have you back for another interview when you hit that 1 billion parcels in 2026.
It's a deal. We'll consider that locked in.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for your time, David.
All right. Thanks very much, Chris.